So getting into volume 18 of Jobless Reincarnation, the light novel series. As a quick reminder, yes, this is clearly going to be spoiler content, as the anime is not up to this volume currently as of uploading this video. So again, I will be covering spoilers. But talking about volume 18, before I got into the volume, I saw a lot of comments of people saying that this is the worst volume, it's so terrible. So I was very interested going into it, because it piqued my interest in where the issues are. Like, what are the complaints? Is it just the general story? Is it specific characters that aren't liked? What is the underlying problem that people have about it? And I think it's not so much that it's a bad volume, it's just not the strongest one out of them all. And of course, for me, I like the series as a whole, but there are volumes that I would rank higher than others, and I would say this is on the lower end. And I think it's just because it has a lot of stuff that people don't really care as much about, and a lot of that has to do between two particular characters, which are the two cat girls that are introduced into basically what I would say season 2 material, the academy arc, which is the two delinquents. They're basically sort of hooligans that go around, like to bully people, as I've talked about in the previous volumes. They are princesses of the Ittara tribe, however you want to pronounce it. I'm sure I botched it. I'm sure people will tell me how I've mispronounced it. But they are two princesses, and so they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They go into the academy really trying to prove a point, and Fitz basically puts them in line because they try to do some stuff with the princess. And so they've got a track record of being special, is the best way to put it. So then I can definitely see why they're not the favorite characters. I wouldn't say they're bad. I definitely think they have some interesting entertainment value, and that's the thing about series like this. You're going to have characters that you love and characters that you don't like, and it's important to have characters that you don't like in a series, because without characters you don't like, well, it's like a pyramid. If you remove the bottom layer, well, something else is going to end up replacing it. So you're always going to have characters that you dislike or like the least. So I think they serve a great purpose in a story like this if they aren't your favorite. I don't dislike them, I just don't think they're the strongest characters, because there are so many other characters in the story that really carry the series, which is fine. That's the whole point of what I'm saying with the whole pyramid kind of thing, is that you'll have your favorites at the top and then your least favorites at the bottom, and there's always going to be someone at the bottom that you'll not as like as much. I'm not saying you have to dislike them, but they just won't be as your favorites. So of course, explaining about these two girls, Linia is the one that ends up staying behind. She ends up losing that duel, basically getting into sort of the market, trying to do some stuff, and she just ends up really getting into a bad situation. She ends up getting scammed, which doesn't surprise me, because she isn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, but neither of the girls are exactly the sharpest tools in the shed. They're as sharp as a bowling ball, which, yes, that hopefully someone gets that joke. But of course, she gets into trouble. She ends up getting into a lot of debt. She ends up getting sold into slavery, and then leads into how she got kind of broken free, which is Eris. Eris goes for her walks, runs into Linia, and decides she's mine. Ends up killing two individuals, takes her home, and basically locks herself in one of the rooms downstairs, basically sulking because Aisha doesn't like the idea of bringing home a cat. Now, what I thought was funny about the light novel perspective was it made it sound like it was literally exactly that, a cat. Like, oh, Eris brought home a cat. Oh, it can't be that harmful. Like, that's the way Rudy sees it. That's the way you, the reader, are meant to read it. And it's just like, oh, she brought home a cat. So what? No harm done. Sure, they can take care of another cat. Or not another cat, but another animal, and it's that easy. And then you find out that it is, in fact, the Ittara tribe princess, Linia, which then leads into also some individuals rocking up at the front door, basically saying, hey, hand the merchandise back over. And Rudy kind of does this sort of, I would say, a smart approach. He kind of just throws money at them, but he throws more than what's needed to kind of really strike a lot of fear into the individual, because they do say some stuff that's kind of like, excuse me, what did you say? They rock up at the door, they try to get a little bit rough with the maid, and Rudy steps in, and then they try to play hardball, not realizing that they really kind of put their foot in the mouth, kind of like foot and mouth kind of thing, and they kind of throw a threat at Rudy's family at Rudy, and that's where Rudy's like, really? So Rudy kind of uses a bit of an intimidation tactic where he just throws money, and I think it's a bit unintentional. I think he's just trying to like soften them up a little bit, but it comes off very intimidating. It's like, here, have all this money, next time you have problems, you know what to do. Come talk, don't start rubbish. And the fact is that they know that Eris would have just cut them in half regardless. I mean, even though they were trying to get her back, Eris wasn't going to let them, so the smartest thing to do was for Rudy just to kind of buy her out, and he ends up having to write a letter to the people that were going to buy her, which, surprise, surprise, was Eris's family anyway. So it kind of throws a fun tie back to the original kind of thing. And I think what makes it funny is just the fact that Eris follows the family very closely of their obsession over beast people, and of course her treating her like a pet, which she ends up doing. So she ends up becoming a pet. Now, there is also a follow-up part to that story in the volume, but that isn't really the order that it goes into. Basically, those events play out. The entrance exam happens, which, of course, with the younger sister of Rudy kind of stepping up into a higher role now that she's at this academy. Some individuals don't like her so much. Rudy kind of playing the innocent individual, making friends with people that don't like her, but he's kind of like, oh, you know, she's not so bad. And then they bash Rudy as well. He's probably just a fake. And then she rocks up and kind of argues with Rudy at the ceremony. Why are you here? What are you doing? Really just shows that she's quite matured, and definitely is a strong personality that can stand on her own. She's not so timid anymore, which kind of throws some of those people that were kind of bashing on her a bit of a head spin, which I thought was just kind of funny in itself. I don't think you'll ever see those characters really ever again, except maybe passing comments. I thought the whole entrance ceremony was funny in itself. There's also the kind of squealing girls moment where they see Rudy and Roxy together, and Roxy kind of doing her whole turf thing, being like, this is my man kind of thing. Thought that was adorable and cute, and them kind of noting Rudy being somewhat cute and attractive. I mean, hey, you know, he's not bad looking. He's definitely, you know, matured in a good way, especially when he doesn't do his creepy grin, definitely for sure. So that then happens, and then because of the fact that Eris brought in Linia, that she's now a pet, technically a slave, which stirs some bit of drama in the house. The other girls think that Rudy's going to add a fourth wife, which, let's be real, never was going to happen. Rudy does have some good restraint. This leads into her not fitting into the house, because she is just, as I said before, she is not the sharpest tool in the shed. She's also not very good at communication. She's too prideful, and she ends up causing a lot of problems, demonstrating that she is a terrible maid, doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And so it leads into a lot of arguments, and Aisha gets really upset. Her favorite cup ends up getting destroyed, and there's really no remorse. Like, you can tell Linia does feel bad, but she's kind of trying to do the whole ha 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 he, I'm, you know, the big mob type guy or girl. And so Rudy has to kind of come up with a way to find a use for her, because Rudy doesn't really want to kick her out. Well, she's just going to get into trouble anyway and probably get into more debt. So Rudy tries to find some use and ends up finding a use, which I'm not sure what Rudy was really intending on doing at the start. I mean, maybe they might explain it in the later volumes, but he basically gave some money to Aisha, said, hey, I want you to start this kind of business thing, get some people ready to do some work. And they end up starting this whole like bodyguard business, and it almost just feels like it's like an underground mob group where there's this like kind of like a bar kind of thing they go into. There's like 50 people under recruitment. Aisha and Lena have this like whole like bodyguard business running. I thought it was hilarious. I actually thought that was probably the best part of the volume, the fact that the other family members thought that Aisha was into some really big trouble, and then finding out that what Rudy assigned them to doing, they ended up making this big business out of it, and they made lots of money out of it. And I just thought it kind of showed Aisha and Lina, terrible pronunciations, kind of worked well together once you got away from like the maid business and more of like getting into like the actual business itself, like working with people, making contacts, sugaring people up, recruiting, sending out jobs, and they kind of worked really well together. And then they kind of just look like supervillains in themselves with their little glasses or their little sunglasses that they have inside, and they're making all their fat stacks. I thought it was quite an amusing part of the story, though I can kind of understand why some people may not like this volume as much, because it does feel like it's just its own kind of little pocket story that's probably not really going to be super relevant later on. I still think it's kind of fun. Then, of course, Rudy gets a letter about the missing dog from the tribe. So he ends up going there, taking her with him, and that's when they bump into the other one. The other one that's also now in jail for stealing food, which is Persina. You know who I mean. So then Rudy goes into an investigation, trying to work out who ate the actual food. Finds out it was really her. She admitted it after a while. But it's kind of silly because she has all these responsibilities. She was doing all this work. Some situation happened which led her to not being able to eat when she needed to. And she was starving and she just had to eat. Like, she was desperate to eat something, so she ate. And then she got in trouble for it. I'm just sitting there thinking, why is she being in trouble for the fact that people literally tried to starve her and then she ate? Yes, I get it, she stole it, but it's like, couldn't you give some leniency? But they're like, oh, well, she broke the rules. I'm like, yeah, give a punishment. Like, yeah, you've locked her up for a while and then leave it at that. Like, why does things have to be so extreme in that tribe? But basically, Rudy ends up doing the unthinkable and ends up recruiting her to protect the dog, which he ends up getting to keep because, well, the reason why he summoned it was because it is destined to happen, because one of his children are going to be a savior of the world. And so the dog's job is to protect the child. Their job now, the two girls, is to protect the dog, or more just serve the dog, which is kind of funny because the dog is now their superior. So, and that also means Eris gets another play toy to also cuddle with and completely squeeze to death, which is scary when you read in the light novel that apparently Laena basically had a rib cage basically crushed in because Eris is so strong in her sleep that she was squeezing her to the point where, yeah, she basically had to get a certain other individual in the house to pull off some healing spells because, yeah, she went through a lot of pain. So Eris is just scary, but also probably fun in the bed. So, yeah. Then the last part of the volume is mostly to do with the figures, the business behind that, the backstory behind the girl working on the figures, and then also the letter for our sort of dashy man himself, the figure enthusiast, and how he has to return back home because of some issues going on, which of course is the lead up to the next volume, being volume 19, which I will talk much more in depth because it just kind of fits to talk about there. But I did like the backstory for our little sculpture girl herself and some of the sad backstory of that. It kind of made me think, because I just watched a video from Giga and how he talks about tropes and slavery being used in tropes, and I kind of thought it kind of struck me because this was a big topic for this volume between the two girls and then of course the dwarf herself. It is a big thing sometimes in these kind of stories, but you also got to remember these are medieval times, and that kind of thing was a big thing in the medieval times. It's still a thing in these days and ages, depending on which country you go to or where you go on the planet. So I don't think it's, well, it is a trope, but it's a reason why it's a commonly used thing. It's because it is still a commonly thing used now to this day in some places of the world, but it's also a thing that's happened quite a lot in the medieval times. And when you've got a medieval story, you're going to follow a lot of medieval tropes. That's like going into a medieval story and saying, well, you can't use swords and shields because that's an overused trope. It's like, yeah, but it's a common thing in medieval time. Like, of course they're going to use that. It's like saying, how dare you have water in a river? It's like, you using the things that were commonly known back in those times. I get that some people don't like them because it's not meant to be a good thing, but it's something that happened back then. So maybe I might talk about it more in another video and actually properly contextualize my opinion on it, because saying it in a very short form, you can't really get your full opinion out, and that can be heavily taken in a certain way and skewered, so don't take that as like the complete formed out opinion on it. It's just more of a sort of rough thing of being like, yeah, it's a common thing because it's something that happened quite a lot during those times. So that's basically the general whole volume 18 itself. There's of course always going to be little things. I'm very interested to see this being done in an anime format and seeing how people receive this, because as I've said at the start of the video, not many people seem to like this volume, and I'm very curious to know more of why. What exactly did people not like about this volume? Not just I disliked it, that's it. I'd like to know why. So I'd throw that question off to you, the individuals, and of course if you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.